Hello and welcome to Journey. We're so glad you guys are here with us today. And so, a couple things different today about today. I'm going to welcome you guys. We got an announcement video, and then we have some special guests. They're going to come up and introduce themselves to you guys. Many of you guys will be familiar with them. But right now, we got an announcement video. Yay.
Won't never start, but that's okay. Um, yeah, so at this point we walk up. So it's good to know that some things never change around here, right? So, well, or not welcome, because that's what I normally used to say. Thank you so much for having us. If you don't know who I am, my name is Nathan. This is my wife, Justy. If you have no clue who we were a part of Journey since the beginning, and earlier this year, we actually stepped out of being an on-staff worship minister position here and into a role as missions partners with you all. So we do missions work in Malawi, Africa. We started our mission there in 2016 with our first adoption, and as our involvement with the people and the relationships with the people that we met there grew, we saw the needs. We decided to step into some of those needs as a family, and that just grew and grew and grew to the point where we decided to start our own nonprofit and stepped into a missions position here, and now we just do work there. So we're in Malawi about 3 to 4 times a year, sometimes for short trips, maybe it's a couple weeks, sometimes as long as 3 months. That we spend actually on site in Malawi. So we're kind of back and forth, and we do lots of different projects. So our goal is in Malawi is that we provide faith-based humanitarian aid, which means we just try to restore hope, bringing hope to the people there that are in terrible, desperate situations, as well as empower the local people to be their solutions to their problems. So we ask that all the time. What are your problems? What are your solutions? And how can we help get you there? So sometimes our projects are super small. Sometimes it's just helping kids get prosthetics that need them. Sometimes it's helping with storm damage. Maybe somebody's had a roof blown off, or maybe it's just working with local pastors. And then there's other times where we have big projects, like right now. We're actually in the process of building a hospital in a remote area. You saw the statistic in the little intro video. Globally, 1 out of 10 people walk over 3 hours for access to healthcare. In our specific situation, it is a 20-mile walk, which is 4.5 hours. So if you can imagine that if you're a lady and now in active labor, you've got a 4.5-hour walk to the nearest hospital to deliver your child. Or maybe you've been up all night with severe stomach pain. You don't know what's going on. You have a 4.5-hour walk to get your medical needs taken care of. Maybe you've fallen in a hole and you've broken your leg. You now have a 4.5-hour walk to the nearest hospital. And these people are walking not because they're health enthusiasts, but because it's their only option. Many people don't have cars. Many people do not even have a driver's license. Most people cannot afford to hire somebody to drive them. So a lot of times it's people shouldering up next to people, helping them hobble to the nearest hospital, or they just don't go. So you've got people in this area that are dying from very preventable diseases, sometimes small injuries that just progress and progress and progress. So the mortality rate is through the roof. You've got women that decide to have home births, not because it's cool, but because they can't walk 4.5 hours after they've started labor. So the infant mortality rate is through the roof. Mothers are dying. Children are dying in the process of having those babies. So when the need was presented to us, we were like, wow, that's huge. That's completely different than anything we've ever experienced here. So we decided to step in and do something. So we've committed to building this hospital. We've met with the local governments to see what those requirements are. We've got the plans and we've got the ball rolling. So that's our project that we have working on right now. There is a QR code here. I just encourage you, scan this QR code. It's not so that I can get your money. It's just so that you can see these numbers that we're talking about. So there's a cost breakdown. That'll take you to our website, and there's a cost breakdown of what this hospital costs. Here in America, we spend $50 million on a hospital, and there we can build one for $150,000. And that sounds like a lot, but really it's not. There's 3 phases to our project. The first phase is a general clinic, which is just going to take care of general needs, all outpatient stuff. But that's phase 1. We're going to get that going. We're going to get that done. And for $50,000, we can do that. So I don't know how many people we have here on a weekly basis at Journey, but I'd be willing to guess it's over 500. So to put that in perspective, if 500 people gave $100, then our general clinic is done. This is a very achievable goal. And you'll see this cost breakdown, and maybe some of you will think, man, our family could put the whole roof on this thing. That'd be awesome. But more than that, we want to encourage you to pray about this. Pray about the doors that God has in front of you, and maybe where he wants to direct you. And maybe you just want to become prayer partners with us, and we love that. And we are super, super thankful for everybody and the encouragement that you all have given to us. There's multiple ways that you can get involved. We do have our website. This QR code will take you there, and you can follow along with everything that we have going on. We're actually on Facebook now, which is super weird for me because we're not on Facebook, but Akonda Ministries is. And Akonda Ministries just means God's love, as we try to be an extension of God's love to the people of Malawi. So on there, you can find out different ways that you can get involved. You can become a prayer partner with us, praying about our journey and what it looks like. You can also make donations directly on our website if that's what you choose. You can become a monthly partner with us or just donate one time. And then also actually launching today, because it's Journey and we know you all love t-shirts. Yeah, we've actually made some fun t-shirts. So you can get on there, and starting this morning, no one's ordered them yet. You can order shirts and other gear, hoodies like this that just have these statistics on it, that maybe might start a conversation between you and somebody in your workplace about, hey, what's going on with that? How can we make it change? So again, we just wanted to say thank you. Thank you so much for all of your love and support. Even if you don't know who we are, Journey has been a huge part of our lives and doing what we do. And so we can't say thank you enough. So thanks for having us.
So we met with the missions team, met with them, and so the ask that they had for us was $4,000, I think. So we did a cost delay of foundation. So $4,000 is what we would like to help raise for them. He is right. We have about over 500 people, and so when you do the math, that's about $10 a person. And so starting this week, and I think that's a very achievable goal, $10 a person. I think it's a small goal, but achievable goal. But some of you, $10 is nothing. And so if you can give more, give more. So if you want to go onto the missions tab on the Journey app and the giving, or next week we'll talk more about this. I think we can do more than 4,000, but that's up to you guys. I don't get to decide that. So thank you guys for coming. Thanks for what you're doing. If you want to ask them more questions, they will be out in the lobby afterwards. Even if you just want to say hi, Nathan loves hugs. If you want to give him a hug, and so yeah. So thank you guys for coming. Thank you guys for the work that you're doing. So yeah. So today is a little different. We're already 12 minutes in, so I'm already worried about my sermon, but you go ahead and stand up and greet everybody around you.
Daddy worked like a mule mine in Pike County coal. Messed up his back, couldn't work anymore. He said one of these days you'll get out of these hills. Keep your nose on the grindstone and out of the field. See, the ways of this world will just bring you to tears. Keep the Lord in your heart and you'll have nothing to fear. Live the best that you can and don't lie and don't steal. Keep your nose on the grindstone and out of the fields. Well, Daddy, I've been trying, I just can't catch a break. There's too much in this world that I can't seem to shake. But I remember your words, Lord, it brings me to tears. Keep your nose on the grindstone and out of the pills. Keep in mind that a man's just as good as his word. It takes twice as long to build bridges you burn. And there's hurt you can cause, time alone cannot heal. Keep your nose on the grindstone and out of the pills. Well, Daddy, I've been trying, I just can't catch a break. There's too much in this world that I can't seem to shake. But I remember your words, Lord, it brings me to chills. Keep your nose on the grindstone and out of the hills.
For you guys that don't know, and I don't know where you've been, that is a song by Tyler Childers. And here's your water. There you go. Yeah, you're welcome. All right. So that song, there's so much truth in that song. Things that stack against you, things that happen in life, and even that last part. And we're not going to get into it, but there's this line where he goes, "Keep in mind that man is just as good as his word. It takes twice as long to build bridges you burn. And there's hurt in this world that time alone cannot heal." Like that's a sermon like in itself. I mean, we all have to be aware of that. But so where we've been last week and into this week is we're doing this Best Laid Plan series. And this series is based around the idea that we all have plans that we put into place, ideas of what we'd like our life to look like, ideas of like where we'd like to be and things we'd like to happen. But then there's squirrels. And squirrels, what's fascinating about squirrels is squirrels make a lot of plans. And what you know right now, if you live where I live, is that right now squirrels are collecting nuts and seeds and they're planning to plant them in the ground somewhere so that after the winter they have a place to go and get their nuts and seeds. But what we found out last week, which is fascinating, is 74% of the time squirrels forget where they planted their nuts and seeds. 74%. So they have this plan. It sounds like a good plan. We're going to store these things away for the winter and all of these things. 74% of the time, they can't find them. And the question was, do sometimes we feel like squirrels? That we have all of these plans, all of these ideas, all of these things we'd like to see happen, but a majority of the time it doesn't work out the way that we had hoped. So I gave you a cheat sheet last week, and I hope you guys remember this, of things in your life that you have no control over. And here they are. They're real simple. It is the past. I think there's a slide. The past. Maybe there's not. Other people. You can't control the slides. The past, other people, outside circumstances, and other people's responses. You have no control over these things. None. And how much time, effort, and energy do we put in trying to control those things? And how frustrated do we get when we can't control those things? The good news is you do have control over two things, all right? And these are the two things you can control, you and your response. You can't control those things. Now, it's true that, as Tyler said, that there's ways of this world that can bring you to tears, and we've talked about that a lot over the years. And it can be hard. Life can be hard. And many of you have faced a lot of hardships in your lives. Things that have attempted to hold you back, and this is true. But as I was thinking about this song and thinking about this message and where we wanted to go with this idea of when things don't work out the way that we hoped, or when things come up that we don't like or don't want to have to do, I want to give you a new perspective, one that's just as uncomfortable for me as it's going to be for you. So in that song, it's a father telling a son how to get to where he needs to be and to learn from the father's own mistakes. And his response in the song, Tyler Childers, is that, life is hard, which is true, and there's a lot in this world. But then there's this last part, and it's the realization of what happens when you don't work through that stuff. That you can cause a lot of hurt and pain, not only for yourself, but for others. So here's what I want to say, and most of you guys relate to this. There's always a reason we can't fill in the blank. There's always a reason you can't, what is it? There's always a reason you can't be the person you should be the spouse that you should be. There's always a reason you can't be there on time. There's always a reason you can't do that. There's always a reason. But if push came to shove, and we were honest with ourselves, what we may discover is that sometimes these reasons that we come up with, they're really just excuses, right? Sometimes we trick ourselves into believing that the reason we can't do certain things, we can't achieve certain things, we can't become certain types of people, and we have all of these reasons, but they're really just excuses. Excuses we use to justify our behavior, our life, and our choices. Now, excuses are present in all of our lives. In fact, excuses have become making so common every day, it's just routine. And when we experience things in life we don't like, or we get invited to things we don't want to be a part of, or whatever it is, they begin to shape our mindset, and we begin to make excuses. Now, some of these are innocent in of itself. You don't want to be somewhere, you just make an excuse. I can't be there. I can't come to work because my grandpa died. Well, hasn't your grandpa died 5 times now? There's a pattern there? You can't do it. But sometimes in the harder things in life, we continue to make excuses for why we don't grow as human beings. If we only had such a bad childhood, if my parents hadn't been, or if I hadn't had that mean teacher, or that unfair boss, or that cold-hearted spouse, then we would be much further along in life. We come up with excuses. Now, the thing about this is true is that it's so easy to see in other people, right? We hate when other people make excuses that we know are just that, excuses. Sometimes excuses are people just not wanting to own up to things. Sometimes these excuses are just ways people use to get out of things. But we all have excuses. We always have becauses, right? Well, why don't you? Well, because. Why haven't you? Well, because. Why do you keep doing that? Well, why don't you start? Well, because. Why don't you stop? Because. Why don't you just forgive her? Well, because, why don't you quit? Well, because. Why did you say that? Well, because. Now, let me ask you, what do you say to someone when they're presented with something and they give you an excuse, and it's just an excuse? What do you say to that person, right? What do we say to our children, right? You're just making excuses. Stop making excuses. You're trying to pass off an excuse as a real reason why you're not doing something, why you're not becoming something, why you're not being where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be. Implication, when we say you're making excuse, you know what we're really saying to that person? You're just making something up. You're lying. You're not telling the truth. And so what happens so many times is we create in our mind this justification, this reason, but all we're really doing is dressing up an excuse. Now, the pushback on this is, and it's my pushback, well, the reason we have these excuses is because of what? Again, it's just another excuse. Many of us believe these narratives that have been told about us, right? We become a certain type of people. We do certain things. We fall into certain behaviors because of something someone told you, because of something someone called you, because of something you were labeled in your past, and it kind of becomes your identity. It becomes this narrative about yourself, and you start making all these excuses. Now, there's 3 areas where when I was kind of looking into this about excuses, and by the way, if you want to know, we all hate people that make excuses, but if you want to know, there's a lot of real psychology being done today about why people make excuses. And here was what I kind of learned. There's 3 kind of areas that tend to form our narratives that we believe about ourselves, but also lead to decisions we make when it regards other people. And here are the 3 kind of areas. The first one is this: where you are from. Sometimes, depending on where we are from, we kind of believe certain things about ourselves, or what we can become, or what we can do. What you've experienced in life. Did you know, this is a news flash for some of you, did you know that not everybody's experienced life the same way that you have? Right? Did you know that? And so sometimes people are the way they are because of stuff they've experienced. Sometimes it's the realization that you are the way you are because of things you've experienced. And then the last one, and our poor old parents, based on how you were raised. A lot of the behavior, a lot of the excuses we make in life are because of things that happened to us when we were kids and how we were raised. Now, the dangerous side of this is this. Sometimes we make excuses to defend certain behaviors, reactions, and overreactions. Do you know anybody that overreacts to everything? Don't elbow them, right? Now, there's probably a reason that they do that. Do you know somebody that's mad all the time? Like that, right? Well, there's probably a reason. And given time, they'll tell you those reasons, right? They'll tell you the excuses for why they do this, why they overreact, why they respond this way, why they can't get it together. They'll come up with some type of excuse. Now, the other dangerous side of excuses is this. The root of an excuse we use is always blaming something internal on something external. Let me say that again in case you missed it. The root of excuses is always blaming something that's actually internal on something external. Have you noticed that when we come up with excuses, it's never our fault? It's never us. It's always something external that's led us to be this way, or it's always something external as to why we're making this excuse. There's actually a lot of this in the Bible, if you've read it. Jesus talks a lot about excuses, and a lot of people give Jesus excuses. In fact, there's sometimes where Jesus, when people give him excuses, he's not very Christ-like when they give him excuses. He didn't even like excuses, right? Now, there's this one parable that he tells, and it's actually pretty fascinating. And he talks about this idea that this God figure becomes this master in this story. And he has 3 servants. And in this story, he gives these 3 servants talents. Okay? And when he says talent, it's not like America's Got Talent. Like, it represents like some type of ability, some type of thing that you can do to invest in the world to make your life better. And so he gives these 3 guys 3 sets of talents. Now, he also gives them different amounts of talent, which is an important thing to realize, that not everybody's been given the same amount of whatever. Life is different. We've all experienced life different. So in this story, these first 2 guys, they go out and they take whatever the master's given them, and they go and they invest it, and they go and they use it, and they do something with it. Now, just so you know, in case you can't understand the parable, the talent represents your life and what you've been given. The master here represents God. So the first 2 people, they take whatever God has given them, the life and the opportunity that he's given them, and they do something with it. The last person, okay, when it comes time to say, hey, what you did with this talent, what we find out is he didn't do anything with it. In fact, the story says that he went and he buried it in the ground. And what's fascinating about the story is when the master asks him, well, why did you do that? His response is, I knew you were a harsh master. I knew that you were like this, and so I didn't want to take a chance on not being able to give you back what you've given me, and so I went and I buried it. And you know what he's saying in this parable? It's not my fault. It's actually your fault because, see, I'm scared of you. I'm afraid of you. I know the way that you are, and so the reason I wasted my life, the reason I wasted my talent is not because of me. It's actually because of you. Isn't it always so much easier to deflect, to believe that it's something wrong with everybody else and it's never wrong with you? You decide it's not you, it's something out there. It's somebody out there. And the moment that we decide that our problem, especially when it comes to putting things off that we know we should be focusing on, the moment we decide it's something out there, we begin constructing a wall of excuses. And we think we're protecting ourselves by doing this, but we're actually doing the exact opposite. Did you know that when you live a life filled with always making excuses, you're not only hurting those around you, you're often hurting yourself? So here's what I've learned. And I'm not the smartest tool in the shed. Sharpest, it's sharpest, not smartest. See, I just gave you a great example of that. But there is a relationship between your ability, not your willingness. And we've talked about this before. Intentions are great. Intentions do nothing sometimes. There is a relationship between your ability, not your willingness, to follow Jesus, but also to become the person you could and should become. Okay? There is a relationship between your ability to do that and your willingness to push through your excuses, and to call your excuses out for what they actually are. Some of us know people whose excuses have become the master of their life. Do you know someone, and again, don't elbow them, do you know someone who always has an excuse for why they don't do what they should do? Always has an excuse for why they're not where they're supposed to be. Always has an excuse for why their life hasn't gotten together the way that it is. Always has an excuse for the behavior that they put on display that not only hurts them, but also hurts the people around you. Do you know somebody who it's never their fault? And it's because they've allowed excuses to become their master. They just have. You can't do that. You shouldn't try that. You shouldn't try that again. You should not talk to them. You should not apologize. You can actually let all of your excuses of why you shouldn't do things become the master in your life. But here's what we have to understand about excuses, and here's why we're talking about this. Did you know that most of the time, most of the excuses we make, they're just lies, aren't they? Aren't they? You ever told somebody an excuse of why you couldn't be somewhere and you knew you're just lying? Have you ever made an excuse of why you couldn't do something in your life that probably needed to be done, and deep down inside you knew with a little bit of effort you probably actually could make that work, but you're lying? You're making things up. And I want to be fair. I'm fully aware that there's reasons we make things up. There's reasons that sometimes we feel like we have to give excuses. There's reasons why we feel like we have to give an excuse. But why would you deceive yourself and not be honest with yourself and just call it what it is? Now, regardless of the reason that so many of us make excuses for different things in our life, specifically about not becoming the type of person that we could become and that God wants us to become, regardless of why we make excuses, here's what I don't want. I don't want any of us, me included, to get to the end of our life and think, good grief, I spent my whole life behind this stupid wall of excuses, and it's held me back from the life and the health and the joy-filled relationships you could have had. But you didn't have that because you just kept making excuses. There's this book in the Bible called Hebrews. It's not really a book. It's actually a sermon that got written down, and now we call it a book because it's in the Bible, and the Bible is a collection of books. Now, in this book, the author is writing to a Jewish audience, and it's Jewish Christians who are having the difficult time, and they're thinking about quitting on Jesus. And they're actually even kind of giving reasons and excuses as to why they should stop following Jesus. They've hit some bumps. Life is hard. Things aren't going the way that they had planned or the way that they'd hoped. They had these great plans, but it's not working out. And so they're thinking about quitting. And their temptation, and our temptation, is always when things get difficult or uncomfortable or just something we don't want to do, we come up with reasons that we can't do it anymore. And sometimes those reasons are really just excuses, aren't they? And in the midst of this conversation, in the midst of this sermon that this person is giving to these Jewish Christians in this area, he gives them this thing, and he gives them this kind of idea, and he kind of paints a picture for them of what it would look like if they didn't give up, but he kind of gives them this handle. And he says this, he's saying in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1, he goes, I know you got your reasons for why you're quitting, but here's what he says in Hebrews chapter 12. He says, let us throw off everything that hinders. All right? So the terminology here is, and the illustration he's using is talking kind of like about sports. He's talking about running specifically. And the idea is that you want to throw off everything that hinders you from running. Now, I'm a runner. I know that some of you might be runners, or you've thought about runners, but you have excuses for why you can't run. So I get that again. But here's the thing. So when you go to run a race, you want the least amount of things that can hold you back. A giant poofy jacket is not going to help you at all, right? You want to wear, and that's why runners and cyclists, we wear the most ridiculous outfits, right? It's because we want to strip away everything that could hold us back, that could keep us from running the race. And so he says, let us throw off everything that hinders, anything that could be an encumbrance. Rid yourself of anything that could trip you up in life. Throw off everything that hinders. So when you think about the life that you want to live and the person that you want to become and the marriage you want to have and the relationship with your kids that you want to have, you need to throw off everything that's going to hinder you from being able to have that relationship and to be that person. And he says, so let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin. Now here's the part that we don't like. Now, I'm going to be real specific about what Jesus says is and isn't sin. Jesus never, and you can look this up if you don't believe me, Jesus never gives us these 5 things are sins and these things aren't. He never gives us a list of all of these things. He's very consistent when Jesus is here as to what a sin is. Do you know what the definition for sin is for Jesus? Sin was anything that hurt someone. And sin was anything that hurt you. Which makes sense, because if God so loved the world, and Jesus is the best example of God that we have, he doesn't want the people of the world to hurt each other and to hurt themselves. So anything that hurts a person is a sin, right? And anything that hurts you is a sin. We've already established that if we're really honest, sometimes the excuses we give to others but maybe even more importantly, the excuses we give to ourselves are really just lies. Lying is a sin. And do you know why lying is a sin? Lying is a sin because it breaks a relationship. See, when we were kids, if our parents would have told us, well, you don't lie. Well, why not? Because I get what I want when I lie. No, the reason you don't lie is because lying breaks a relationship. Lying breaks trust. Lying hurts the other person. Most of us, if we're honest, our excuses are just lies. Too harsh? That you're a liar and I'm a liar? Okay. Sometimes when we give excuses, we aren't telling the whole truth. Does that make you feel better about yourself? Right? Because if that's what you need, you're probably lying to yourself already. Lying is a sin, and lying to yourself is a sin, because lying to yourself hurts yourself. And if we aren't honest, isn't some of our excuses really just a lie we tell ourselves about ourselves to make ourselves feel better about ourselves? So when the author says, I want you to get rid of anything that's going to hold you back, anything that's going to stop you from running the race you're supposed to run, anything and any sin that entangles you, this includes lying to yourself. Because when you lie to yourself, you hurt yourself. And sometimes you have to be honest and say, I've been calling all of these things reasons why I can't, why I haven't, why I couldn't. But in reality, there's excuses, and some of those excuses are just lies that we tell ourselves. So he goes on to say, throw off everything that hinders you and the sin that so easily entangles you, which is an interesting idea in Scripture. Did you know that there's sins that are pretty obvious? It's things that hurt you and hurt other people. But there's often also things that actually hinder you from being the person that you should and could become. That aren't necessarily a sin, they're just not a good idea. In other words, if we throw off everything that hinders and we throw off the sin that entangles, here's what he's saying. No more excuses. Stop giving excuses. You know the race. You know what you need to do. So do it. And he says, if you do this, you're going to be free to run the race that's marked out for you. You're going to be able to endure the race that's marked out for you. And here's why this is important. Now, whether you're religious or not, and I know some of us are still figuring this out and trying to understand this thing, but the idea in the Christian worldview is that God has a plan for us. God has an idea for us. God has best laid plans for our life. God has best laid plans for what humans can actually become. And so, when you allow things to trip you up, when you allow things to hold you back, when you make excuses for why you can't run this race, and you're hurting yourself. And let's be honest to ourselves. If you can lie to yourself the rest of the day, but in this moment, just be honest with yourself, and I'll be honest with myself. Some of us are not running the race we could and should be running, are we? And our excuses might be what's holding us back. Now, the next thing he's going to say, I want to tell you what he says in kind of plainer English so you understand this before I show you what he says. But this is a huge idea. His next words are going to be this. So you've got this race that you need to run. You got these things that are hindering you back. The race represents your life. These things that are hindering you back are these sins, maybe these excuses we keep making about why we can't be the person we should be and run the race that we should. And here's what he says. He says, you need to quit focusing only on yourself. Which is not easy in our culture, is it? Because we live in a culture where we make everything about ourselves. The Bible talks about we need to put the needs of others first. Because at the end of the day, if you only focus on yourself, at the end of it, you only have yourself to show. And if we're honest, sometimes when we make excuses, it's because we're only focused on ourselves. We don't care how our excuses hurt people, what they do to people, how they break relationships. And sometimes, which is really crazy, we don't think about how they hurt us. And so we're focusing on ourselves when we make excuses, but we're not focusing on the healthy version of ourselves that we could become. Here's a harsh reality. Have you noticed that people who always make excuses rarely make much of a difference? Psychology Today says this: excuse makers risk being seen as deceptive, self-absorbed, and ineffectual. They are viewed as unreliable social participants with flawed character. Does that sound like anybody that you know? Excuses often make you small. They make you self-absorbed. They rob other people of the best potential, not only in themselves, but also of you. And you may not always agree with this, okay? You might agree with my next statement. And we don't want to admit it because we don't like this word, but maybe we should start admitting a little bit more that excuses are often just selfishness. Nobody wants to be defined by that. Nobody wants to say that. And so, if you were Jesus and you knew all of the pain and the heartache and all of this that could be caused by this, what would you say? What would you do? If you're the writer of Hebrews and you don't want people to get hurt, what would you say? So here's what he says, all together. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus. His understanding is if you want to run the best race possible, then you have to have the right source to look at. And he believes that this right source is fixing our eyes on Jesus. And he's not the only one. Tyler Childers agrees. What does he say? Keep the Lord in your heart and you'll have nothing to fear. Live the best that you can and don't lie and don't steal. And don't lie to yourself. When you are looking at Jesus, are you ready for this? When you're focused and fixed on Jesus, what that causes you to do is look away from your excuses, look away from your fears, look away from the lack of opportunity, the lack of resources, the failure in your past, maybe even the disability that you felt along the way. When you have your eyes focused on Jesus, you can't be looking at all that other stuff. When you choose to follow Jesus, you'll eventually have to stop manufacturing excuses. If you really decide to follow Jesus, Jesus will lead you through this. And if you follow Jesus, you will eventually have to stop manufacturing excuses because you'll eventually have to stop lying to the people around you and lying to yourself. And the reason you'll stop doing that is because it hurts you and it hurts them. And Jesus said, do you know what sin is? Sin is when you hurt other people and you hurt yourself. One last thought. In that text, it says, such a great cloud of witnesses. What's interesting, if you flip back just one more chapter to Hebrews chapter 11, what happens in that chapter before is it gives a list of people. People that had every excuse not to do something. People that had every excuse not to become the person. I mean, if you go back and you flip back a chapter, these people, and the writer, he lists all of the obstacles, all of the reasons, all of the excuses they could have given not to do what they should do, what the right thing was to do, and given every reason of why they couldn't become the person that we know them to become. They had every excuse, and you know what? They still did it. Have you ever noticed that sometimes the people that do the most good in the world are the people that have the most reasons not to? I mean, the most inspiring stories are they actually had real reasons, not excuses. They had real reasons, and they still accomplished what they did in the world. They took what they had, and they did something with it. They did something in the relationships around them, and the people around them. They took the talents that had been given to them and they didn't bury them in the ground because they thought God might be angry at them or mad at them. They didn't deflect. No, they said, you know what? We have this opportunity. Let's do something with it. Again, there isn't a relationship between your ability to run a race and your not your willingness, but your ability to push through the excuses, to call them out for what they actually are. And for those of us who are Jesus followers, there's a relationship between our ability, not our willingness, our ability to follow Jesus and our willingness to acknowledge an excuse for what it really is. An excuse is something that hinders you from running the race that God has planned for you. An excuse is a hindrance from being the person that you could become. An excuse is a hindrance from being the husband and the father and the boss and the neighbor and the friend that you could become. An excuse hinders us from running the race. We all have plans, and life is hard, and there's things that's going to come up. But don't let an excuse be the thing that keeps you from the plans that God has for you. Let's pray. Father God, we love you. We thank you. God, I pray that all of us in this room will just take a moment and be honest with ourselves, be honest with the reality of the world that we find ourselves, be honest with, God, I am the king of making excuses sometimes. I have an excuse for why I couldn't or why I shouldn't or why I was late or why I didn't do this. And God, sometimes it's not helping me. It's not helping the people around me. God, some of us, it's a serious thing. Like in that song, we have an excuse for why we couldn't become a certain type of person or get out or why we hurt these people or whatever it is, God. And God, help us to call it out for what it is. It's just a lie. It's a lie we tell ourselves. And God, give us the strength sometimes to push through. The ability to push through those lies, the ability to call them out for what they are, which is a hindrance. God, help us to be honest people, to be real people, to be honest with you, with the people around us, and maybe most importantly, to be honest with ourselves. And in that, God, make we sure that we know there's all the grace, mercy, and love that we will receive from you. So we love you, and we thank you. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
This time, you can receive communion, take a moment to reflect on what that means to you and what that means. If you haven't yet been able to obtain that, you can find that on the baskets at the back of the room there. Just take a moment to think about what that means for what your Lord and Savior did for you and sacrificing himself. That represents his body and the blood that he shed for you. And when you're ready, you can stand and worship with us.
You give life. We got one more worship song for you.
I searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. Treasures of faith are never enough. And you came along, put me back together. And every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing that's better than you. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. You've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. There's not a place your mercy and grace won't find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing that's better than you. Oh, there's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing that's better than you. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who cares. You turn mourning to dancing. You give beauty for ashes. You turn shame into glory. You're the only one who cares. You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who cares. You're the only one who cares. You're the only one who cares.
Thanks for worshiping with us. We'll see you next week.
You turn graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways.